The first time my best friend told me he loved me, I didn't say anything. I just stared at him. Because I had spent 2 years convincing myself that love was the one thing I could live without. And now the person standing in front of me was the one person I could never afford to lose. William. My best friend. The man who had known me since we were teenagers. The person who had seen me at my worst and stayed anyway. The person I trusted more than anyone in the world. And the person I had never once allowed myself to imagine kissing. Until that night. Until I heard him say the words I'd never expected. Martin. I've been in love with you for a long time. My heart stopped. I remember the sound of rain against the apartment window. I remember the dim light above the kitchen. I remember William looking at the floor because he was too afraid to look at me. And I remember thinking one terrifying thing. What if I loved him too? Because just a few months earlier, I had sworn I would never love anyone again. I had made that promise after Mandy broke my heart. I thought keeping my heart closed would keep me safe. I was wrong. Because sometimes the person who breaks through the walls you built isn't a stranger. Sometimes. It's the person who's been standing beside you the entire time. I used to think love was supposed to feel like home. Warm. Safe. Comforting. That's what I believed when I was with Mandy. I was 22 when we started dating, and for the first time in my life, I thought I had finally found someone who understood me. I gave her everything. My trust. My time. My future plans. My heart. Maybe that's why losing her hurt so much. It wasn't just the breakup. It was the way she made me feel afterward. Like everything I'd believed about love had been a lie. She moved on quickly. I didn't. For months I couldn't sleep properly. I stopped answering calls. I avoided places where I might run into her. Even music became difficult because every song seemed to remind me of something we'd done together. Eventually I got tired of being broken. So I made a decision. I wouldn't date again. Not for a while. Maybe not until college was over. Maybe not until I was older. Maybe never. I didn't care. I just wanted peace. I remember sitting on the floor of my bedroom one night, staring at my phone after deleting Mandy's number. I whispered to myself, never again. That became my rule. No dating. No relationships. No getting emotionally attached. No giving someone enough power to destroy me again. And surprisingly, I was good at following it. Then there was William. William Hayes had been my best friend since school. He was the complete opposite of me. Where I overthought everything, William acted. Where I stayed quiet, he filled the silence. Where I carried things alone, he always somehow noticed. We had grown up together. We knew each other's embarrassing stories. We knew each other's families. We knew each other's habits. By 24, we didn't even have to explain ourselves anymore. A look was enough. A sigh was enough. Sometimes William would call me and say nothing for 30 seconds. I'd ask, "Why did you call?" And he'd answer, "I forgot." I'd laugh. "You're an idiot." "Yeah, but I'm your idiot." I'd roll my eyes. But secretly, those moments meant everything to me. After Mandy, William was the person who stayed. He didn't tell me to move on. He didn't tell me to find someone else. He never said, "You'll meet another girl." He simply stayed. When I couldn't sleep, he talked to me. When I didn't want to talk, he sat beside me. When I became distant, he didn't take it personally. And when people asked why I was still single, William always gave the same answer. Maybe Martin is happier this way. I never understood why that sentence made my chest feel strangely warm. At the time, I thought it was because William understood me. That's all. Just friendship. Nothing more. At least that's what I told myself. One afternoon, we were sitting outside a small cafe near campus. William was drinking coffee while I stared at my phone. He looked at me. "You're doing it again." "Doing what?" "Checking your dating apps." I laughed. "I deleted them months ago." "Exactly. You're checking to see if they're still deleted." I looked at him. "You're annoying. You're predictable." I smiled. For a moment, everything felt normal. Safe. Easy. I didn't know then that William was looking at me differently. I didn't know he had already fallen for me. And I definitely didn't know that my promise to never love again was about to become the one promise I couldn't keep. If someone had asked me what William meant to me back then, I would have answered without hesitation. My best friend. It was simple. At least I thought it was. William was part of almost every part of my life. We studied together. We cooked together. We watched terrible movies together. We went on late-night drives whenever neither of us could sleep. Sometimes we'd sit in his car for an hour without saying anything. We didn't need to. Silence had never been uncomfortable between us. There was something about William that made silence feel safe. One rainy evening I came home exhausted. It had been one of those days where everything went wrong. My professor had criticized my work. I'd missed an important deadline. Then I'd received a message from someone who reminded me of Mandy. I didn't answer. I went home, changed clothes, and lay down. 20 minutes later, someone knocked. I already knew who it was. When I opened the door, William stood there holding 2 paper bags. Food. I stared at him. How did you know? You didn't answer my messages. So, you always answer. I shrugged. Maybe I didn't feel like it. He looked at me for a second. Then he walked inside. He didn't ask questions. He didn't force me to explain. He simply put the food on my table and sat down. We ate quietly. After a few minutes, William said, "Bad day?" I nodded. "Mandy?" I looked at him. He immediately understood. "Sorry. It's not your fault." "I know." He leaned back. "Still sorry." I looked at him. Sometimes William's kindness frustrated me. Not because it was bad. Because it was too good. He always knew when I needed someone. And he never made me feel guilty for needing him. That night after dinner we watched a movie. Halfway through I fell asleep. When I woke up, William was still there. The television was muted. He was sitting on the other side of the couch, looking at me. "What?" I asked sleepily. "Nothing." "You were staring." "I wasn't." "You were." He smiled. "Go back to sleep, Martin." I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because of the way he said my name. Maybe because of how gentle his voice sounded. Or maybe because, for a brief second, I felt something I couldn't explain. But I ignored it. I had to. Because William was my safe place. And you don't destroy your safe place by asking questions you aren't prepared to answer. Over the next few months, our friendship became even closer. There were little things. William remembering how I liked my coffee. William knowing when I was pretending to be fine. William saving the last slice of pizza for me. William texting me whenever he got home safely. None of it seemed romantic. Not then. It just felt like William. One evening we were sitting outside my apartment. The air was cool. The city was quiet. William looked at me and said, "Do you ever think you'll date again?" I laughed. "No. Never? Never." He looked away. I didn't notice the sadness in his eyes. "If you met the right person?" he asked. "There isn't a right person." "How do you know?" "Because I already tried." He was quiet. Then he said softly, "Maybe you tried with the wrong person." I looked at him. For some reason neither of us laughed. The silence lasted too long. Then William stood. "Good night." "Good night." He walked away. I watched him disappear down the street. I didn't know why my chest felt tight. I didn't know why his words kept repeating in my head. Maybe you tried with the wrong person. At the time, I thought he was talking about someone else. I didn't know he was talking about himself. The night I discovered William's secret was completely accidental. I hadn't planned to hear anything. I was supposed to meet him for dinner. He had asked me to come over earlier that evening. When I arrived, I noticed the front door was slightly open. I knocked. No answer. I stepped inside. Then I heard voices. William was talking to someone in the living room. I stopped. I was about to announce myself when I heard my name. "Martin doesn't know." I froze. I didn't move. Another voice asked something I couldn't make out. Then William answered. "I can't tell him." His voice sounded different. Not nervous. Scared. I stepped closer. The next sentence changed everything. "Because I'm in love with him." My heart stopped. For a moment I thought I'd misunderstood. I stood there completely still. William continued. "I've been trying to get over it for years." Years. The word echoed in my head. Years? How could that be possible? William laughed quietly, but there was no happiness in it. "He's my best friend. If I tell him, I could lose him." I couldn't breathe properly. William loved me. My best friend loved me. And suddenly, every memory I'd ever had with him seemed different. The late-night conversations. The way he'd look at me. The way he remembered everything. The way he always stayed. I backed away from the door. I didn't want him to see me. I didn't know what I was supposed to say. So I left. I walked outside and kept going. I didn't even know where I was headed. My phone vibrated. "William." I didn't answer. It vibrated again. I still didn't answer. By the time I reached my apartment, my mind was a mess. I sat on my bed, stared at the wall, and whispered, "William loves me." I expected anger, confusion, maybe even disgust. But what I felt scared me more. I missed him. Immediately. I wanted to call him. I wanted to hear his voice. I wanted to know if he was okay. What? That was the question I couldn't answer. If I didn't feel anything for him, Why did my heart hurt at the thought of him being afraid to lose me? I spent the entire night remembering things I'd forgotten. A hug after my breakup. William falling asleep on my shoulder during a movie. His hand resting against mine while we drove. The way he'd smile whenever I walked into a room. I had always called those moments friendship. But now I wasn't sure. The next morning, William showed up at my door. I opened it. He looked exhausted. Why didn't you answer? I couldn't speak. He studied my face. Then his expression changed. You heard me. I looked away. William closed his eyes. For several seconds, neither of us said anything. Finally, he whispered, Martin. How long? He swallowed. Please. How long, William? He looked at me. 3 years. 3 years. I stepped backward. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you'd leave. How could you know that? Because you told me. I stared at him. He continued. You said you never wanted to fall in love again. My throat tightened. I didn't mean. You did. He smiled sadly. You meant it. I didn't know what to say. William looked down. I'm not asking you for anything. His voice broke slightly. I just wanted you to know that none of it was fake. What wasn't fake? Any of it. He looked at me. Our friendship. Every time I stayed. Every time I checked on you. Every time I told you that you deserved better. I couldn't breathe. I never wanted to pressure you. He stepped back. So if you need space, I'll give you space. Then he turned. I watched my best friend walk away. And for the first time in my life, I realized something terrifying. The thought of losing William hurt more than the thought of falling in love. I spent the next week trying to convince myself that nothing had changed. It was impossible. Everything had changed. William stopped texting me. Not because he was angry. Because he was giving me the space he'd promised. That somehow hurt even more. I would pick up my phone and instinctively search for his name. Then I'd remember. He wasn't texting anymore. I missed him. I missed his stupid jokes. His random messages. His habit of stealing food from my plate. His voice. His presence. I had spent years believing that love was the dangerous thing. But now I was beginning to realize that maybe losing someone could hurt just as much. One evening, I was standing by my bedroom window when I saw William across the street. Our apartments faced each other. They always had. For years, we joked that our windows were our private communication system. When we were younger, we'd wave at each other. Sometimes we'd hold up notes. Sometimes we'd stay on video calls even though we could literally see each other through the glass. That night, his window was dark. I stared at it. Then I realized how much I missed him. I grabbed my jacket. I walked to his apartment. When he opened the door, he looked surprised. Martin? We need to talk. He stepped aside. I walked in. We sat across from each other. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said, I've been thinking. William nodded. About what? Us. He looked nervous. I don't want you to be afraid of me. I'm not afraid of you. Then what are you afraid of? I looked down. Me. He didn't understand. I took a breath. I'm afraid of what happens if I let myself feel something. William was silent. I continued. Mandy made me believe that loving someone means giving them a weapon. His expression softened. Martin. I know you're not her. I know. I know you're different. He looked at me. Then what are you trying to tell me? I didn't know. That was the truth. I didn't know. I don't know what I feel. William nodded slowly. Okay. But. He waited. I don't want you to disappear. His eyes changed. I could see the hope he was trying desperately not to show. Okay, he whispered. I mean it. I know. I looked at him. You've been my best friend for years. I know. I don't want that to end. It won't. Then I asked the question I'd been too afraid to ask. What if I need time? William smiled. Then I'll give you time. What if I don't know where this goes? Then we don't decide where it goes. What if I get scared? I'll understand. His answers were so simple. No pressure. No demands. No promises he couldn't keep. Just patience. And somehow that made me feel safer than anything else could have. William reached toward me. Then stopped. I looked at his hand. He pulled it back. I surprised both of us by reaching out first. My fingers touched his. He froze. I held his hand. Neither of us spoke. And in that moment I understood something. Love didn't have to arrive like a storm. It could arrive quietly. Like a hand finding yours in the dark. Like someone staying when they had every reason to walk away. Like William. Nothing changed overnight. And I was grateful for that. William and I didn't suddenly become a perfect couple. We didn't start acting differently around everyone else. We simply became more honest. Sometimes we'd sit together and talk about what we were feeling. Sometimes we didn't talk about it at all. There were days when I was confident. There were days when I was terrified. William never made me feel guilty for either. One night, I finally told him everything I'd never been able to say. I don't want to become dependent on you. He looked at me. Why? Because I've already lost myself once. He shook his head. Martin, loving someone doesn't mean disappearing into them. I looked at him. You can't promise you'll never hurt me. No. His honesty surprised me. But I can promise I'll never intentionally lie to you. I smiled slightly. That's a strange promise. It's the one I can keep. I laughed. And somehow, that was the moment I knew I could trust him. Not because he promised me forever, but because he didn't pretend to know the future. We decided to take things slowly. One step, then another. Our first almost date happened on a Saturday. We went to a small bookstore we'd visited hundreds of times. Except this time, everything felt different. William picked up a book. This one. What about it? You'd like it. You've never read it. I know you. I smiled. You think you know everything about me. I do. That's arrogant. Accurate. I laughed. Later we walked through the city. Our shoulders touched. Neither of us moved away. When we stopped at a crosswalk, William's hand brushed mine. He looked at me. I looked back. Neither of us moved. Then I took his hand. It was such a small thing. But my heart was pounding. William's fingers tightened around mine. You okay? He asked. I nodded. Yeah. You sure? I smiled. For once. We kept walking. That evening we sat outside my apartment. The city lights were glowing below us. William looked at our hands. Then at me. Thank you. For what? For giving me a chance. I shook my head. I haven't given you anything. He smiled. You gave me hope. I looked at him. And something inside me finally softened. I leaned closer. William didn't move. I stopped just inches from him. My heart was racing. Martin? Yeah. Are you sure? I nodded. Then I kissed him. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't perfect. It was soft. Careful. Almost hesitant. When we pulled apart, we stared at each other. William smiled. I laughed nervously. That was? Yeah. Good? Very. I looked down. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about Mandy. I wasn't thinking about heartbreak. I wasn't thinking about the promise I'd made. I was thinking about William. And I realized that maybe I'd been waiting for someone like him all along. Falling in love with William didn't happen in one moment. It happened in hundreds of tiny ones. It was the way he smiled when I walked into a room. The way he remembered my favorite songs. The way he'd leave coffee outside my door when he knew I'd stayed up late working. The way he listened. Really listened. It was in ordinary mornings. Shared meals. Long drives. Quiet evenings. Arguments about movies. Laughing until our stomachs hurt. I began to understand that love wasn't always fireworks. Sometimes it was familiarity. Comfort. Choice. William never tried to become the center of my world. He simply became part of it. And I loved him for that. One evening we were sitting by my window. The same window where I'd spent nights looking across at his apartment. William was reading something on his phone. I watched him. He noticed. What? Nothing. You're staring. I smiled. You always say that. Because you always do it. I laughed. Then I became serious. William. Yeah. I love you. His phone slipped slightly in his hand. He stared at me. What? I smiled. I said I love you. His eyes became wet. He laughed quietly. I've waited so long to hear that. I moved closer. I know. He looked at me. You don't have to say it because you think you should. I'm not. You're sure? I nodded. I've never been more sure about anything. William reached for my hand. I love you too. We sat there holding hands. And I realized something. I hadn't fallen in love with a stranger. I had fallen in love with the person who already knew me. The person who had seen me broken. The person who had watched me build walls. And instead of trying to tear them down, he had simply waited for me to open the door. That night we kissed again. Longer this time. Still gentle. Still careful. But there was no fear anymore. Only trust. When I rested my forehead against his, I whispered, I'm still scared. William smiled. Me too. Good. Why good? Because at least I'm not scared alone. He laughed. Then he pulled me closer. And for the first time, I understood what love could actually feel like. Not perfect, not fearless, just real. Months later, I thought about the promise I'd made after Mandy broke my heart. Never again. I'd been so certain, so convinced that keeping people out would protect me. But sitting beside William one evening, I finally understood the truth. The promise hadn't protected me. It had only kept me lonely. William and I were sitting near the window. Our hands were intertwined. Outside, the city was quiet. The same city that had watched us grow from teenagers into adults. The same windows where we'd once talked for hours without ever imagining what we'd eventually become. William looked at me. "What are you thinking?" I smiled. "About how strange life is." "That's deep." "Shut up." He laughed. I looked at our hands. I used to think love meant losing control. William squeezed my hand. "And now?" "Now I think love means choosing someone even when you can't control what happens next." He smiled. "I like that." I looked at him. "You know what else?" "What?" "You were right." "About?" "The wrong person." He laughed. "I told you." I shook my head. "Don't ruin the moment." He smiled. I leaned closer. "You weren't the person who fixed me." William became quiet. "You didn't need to." "I know. You just needed someone who wouldn't make you feel broken." I looked at him. "You were always there." "Yeah." "Why?" He smiled. "Because you're my best friend." I laughed softly. "Still?" "Always." I rested my head against his shoulder. For years, I had believed that falling in love meant risking everything. Now I understood that sometimes love wasn't about risking yourself. Sometimes it was about finally allowing yourself to be known. William knew my fears, my mistakes, my past, my insecurities, and he stayed. Not because he had to, because he chose to. I thought about Mandy one last time. Not with anger, not with sadness, just acceptance. She had hurt me, but she had also taught me something. A broken heart doesn't mean you're incapable of loving again. Sometimes it simply means you haven't met the person who makes you feel safe enough to try. And I had. His name was William Hayes, my best friend, my first real love, the person I had never expected, the person I had spent years overlooking because he had always been right there. I turned toward him. "William." "Yeah. I think I finally understand." "Understand what?" "Why I couldn't fall in love again." He smiled. "Why?" "Because I was waiting for someone who felt like home." His expression softened. "And?" I smiled. I was sitting beside him the whole time. William didn't say anything. He just pulled me closer. I closed my eyes. For the first time, I didn't feel afraid. I didn't need to know what tomorrow would bring. I didn't need a guarantee that nothing would ever hurt. I didn't need a promise of forever. I only needed this moment. His hand in mine. His shoulder against mine. His heartbeat beside me. And the quiet certainty that somehow my best friend had become the man I loved. I had spent years believing that never loving again would make me strong. But I finally understood that courage wasn't keeping your heart locked away. Courage was opening it again after someone had broken it. So I broke the promise I'd made to myself. And I don't regret it. Because I didn't lose myself when I fell for William. I found the part of myself I'd been too afraid to let anyone see. And maybe that's what love really is. Not someone who saves you. Not someone who completes you. Just someone who sits beside you in the darkness. And stays long enough for you to realize you were never alone. William had been my best friend first. And somehow, without me even noticing, he had become my home.